In Pursuit of Truth, this is your host, Sir Patrick Mack. Boys and girls, today I want to talk at you a little bit about these possible indictments coming in for Andrew McCabe, the IG report, Sergey Skripal, D notices, and one bad dude goes by the name of Corn Pop. Don't you go rolling up on Corn Pop! Meanwhile, we just keeping it gangster over here, I guess. I'm over here at the American Spectator. Thanks to an anon who sent me this a few days back. This is an older article from 2018. Big dots, did they connect? Steele and Skripal revisited. And I want to talk about this real quick just to make a quick connection. Just came across an intriguing theory about Sergey Skripal, the former Soviet-Russian military intelligence agent who spied for Britain and along with his daughter Yulia was nearly killed this spring by a dose of the nerve agent Novichok in the town of Salisbury, England, where they live. And if you'll remember, Sergey Skripal had ties to Christopher Steele. Sergey Skripal has been really long suspected to be kind of the original source of the... And of course, this Sergey Skripal was long known as a double agent, so we're not really sure about where his loyalties lie. But I found this pretty interesting, and I want to show you why. Now, this is in regards to what it says here, March 21st interview on the John Batchelor Show. This is an interview with Gregory R. Copley, editor and publisher of Defense and Foreign Affairs, posited that Sergey Skripal is the unnamed Russian intelligence source in the Steele dossier. Now, we're going to cruise through some of this here. I'm on the second paragraph. Copley further explained, or tried to explain, to Batchelor, who kept cutting him off, and that seems to be kind of a theme throughout this interview here. The people who wished to see Skripal become quiet were people in Washington, the Democratic National Committee, the Clinton campaign, and people around Christopher Steele himself. I'm not saying necessarily that MI6 or the British government had a witting hand in it, but there are too many people who had an axe to grind to make sure that Skripal did not. Did not what? Batchelor steps on the end of Copley's sentence to interject a question about whether the Novichok attack on the Skripals could have been a gangland hit. And it seems that throughout this interview here that the interviewer is kind of trying to derail the conversation. But there's some interesting stuff in here. Copley had already explained that in Skripal's UK retirement, he did plenty of freelance work providing researchers for a price with that perfect shot of authentic but also custom-made, quote-unquote, Russian intelligence. And of course, we are already starting to see, and we've known this for a long time, but I should say coming out into the public narrative, we're all starting to see now that, of course, the information that was compiled in this dossier was all fake. And of course, James Comey signed off on it. Many people did. They went ahead and used it anyway. But this would be the guy that it originated from. So Copley says he would write whatever people wanted. He would say, "What are you trying to achieve? Let me help you." And he would do that. And he was apparently prepared to, if you like, to fold under pressure and admit that he had done that, and admit what he had written about Trump in that dossier was pure fiction, written simply to provide his client with ... Okay, well, that's pretty telling right there, right? If this guy was he was just going to go ahead and drum up any kind of quote-unquote intelligence for anyone. And of course, there were people that were searching this out during the election times and really even before that, right? And yet this guy was not only willing to admit that he was the source, he was admitting that he was going to fake it. And if you'll remember, who was not willing to cop to this dossier was Christopher Steele himself. So if Christopher Steele was playing ball, but Skripal was not, and it turns out that Skripal was the source of this dossier, well, then that kind of changes things, right? And it kind of highlights this whole Novichok attack again, because then it would really seem more like there would be some DC interest for this guy to shut his mouth, considering their whole Russia narrative was based based on this. Now, the interview cuts him off again, and Batchelor steps on Copley again, this time to put in a question about legality. There's nothing illegal about this, correct, Gregory? Copley says, not necessarily, until you get to the part where this was not just providing intelligence services to the Clinton campaign. It was providing a document for use in political warfare operations to influence an election. Of course, that's what they're pounding the drum over there on Fox News right about now. There, he was basically fabricating material, purporting it for it to be intelligence. So now let me cruise you down here. Even so, Copley's assessment, which he had said he had based on conversations we've had with people familiar with Skripal, came through loud and clear. In Skripal's pseudo-country gentleman retirement, the ex-GRU MI6 double agent was selling custom-made Russian intelligence. He had fabricated material that went into the Steele dossier, and he was prepared to say so. And that's the biggest deal right there. He was prepared to say so. By Copley's logic, this meant that Skripal's enemies were also Trump's enemies. People in Washington, the Democratic National Committee, the Clinton campaign, and people around Christopher Steele himself, along with their MI6 and British government allies. So while not much has been made about this Novichok agent attack, it seems that it might be bigger than it seems, right? Considering that if this guy really was the origin of all this information, and he was perfectly happy to admit that it was bunk, sounds like Skripal's got no scruples. Now again, from Copley, bear in mind that large elements of the British intelligence community had assumed that Hillary Clinton was going to win the election. They had assumed that it was safe to work with the Obama administration during the 8 years to help surveil U.S. nationals using GCHQ, the British Electronic Surveillance Agency, to surveil U.S. internal phone calls. The NSA is not allowed to do it, so they asked GCHQ to do it. And Q has explained this process quite a bit. A lot of this has to go really even before FISA. FISA was just sort of the cover-up with this, but particularly when they refer to the 702 provision, which talks about only really being able to surveil foreign nationals living outside the United States. So we all know that they had to circumvent the Five Eyes. They had to circumvent the NSA. And this was how they did it. And by drumming up basically various sources that were compiling into the Christopher Steele dossier, which really seems to turn out to be only one or two sources. Really just a bunch of bunk, right? Batchelor cuts in. Right. That's standard, isn't it, Gregory? That was in place during the first Cold War. Copley says it was, but it got a little fast and loose during the Obama administration, where there was an increased level of surveillance of U.S. citizens and telephone calls coming out of the U.S. Bear in mind, we've seen a lot of those reports being used against the Trump people by saying that their calls were surveilled and unintelligible, evidence for the FBI. Yup, enter interviewer. So it sounds like the interviewer really wants to derail this interview. And again, keep in mind, this was back in June of 2018. Since the spring, the Skripal poisoning has just sort of been sitting there, like so much Putin bait, without any discernible context, amid many unanswered questions and few extremely non-satisfactory answers. And that's essentially what the Russian narrative is, right? A bunch of questions that they've posited, but really no satisfactory answers. After listening to the Copley interview, I began to understand part of the reason, at least, that there has been so little light shed on this gruesome incident. Yeah, likely because they'd like to downplay it. They would have loved for this guy to just go away. Because if this guy really is the origin of all this, and he comes up and freely says, yeah, I made it all up for $1, well, that pretty much shuts it all down in a way that really no prosecution could, or really any outside entity. It really, if it came from this guy, he says it's bunk. Christopher Steele's not copping to it. The whole thing not only falls apart, but more importantly is that people start to realize that this spying was going on with Democrats and Republicans. It was pretty much all of Congress. It was all you and I. It was everybody, right? So this is far-reaching, and when Democrats really understand how far-reaching this really was going on, they're going to see that it covered the people that maybe they look up to as well. Maybe they won't be able to care that much if they know that Trump was being spied on, but if they realize that their favorite local senator or congressman or whatever it was also in the mix, and that this affected their side of the aisle, then I think a lot more people will wake up and see what was really going on, and sort of this alarm will hopefully go off. But here's my point. After the poisoning, it turns out that the British government issued two related D notices on the story. A big fat chill on British press coverage. What seems to have been an uppermost in these censorship requests was to ensure that the British press protected the MI6 connection to Sergei, which is interesting all by itself. Such protection would seem to include the name of the retired MI6 agent who recruited Skripal, first discussed here, as has been reported outside of Britain. That retired MI6 agent's name is Pablo Miller. It has also been reported that Miller now works with another retired MI6 agent. His name is Christopher Steele, and that's the connection that they really don't want you to see. And we know all about this, but I do want to talk a little bit about these D notices. Now I'm over here on SpinWatch.org from May of 2018, just a month before that other article, revealed rebranded D notice committee issued 2 notices over Skripal affair. And these seem to be right here at the title, little copies here of what these D notice look like here. And let me try and read this middle one. The issue surrounding the identity of a former MI6 informer, Sergei Skripal, is already widely available in the public domain. However, the identities of intelligence associated with Sergei Skripal are not yet widely available. Okay, so this is a little bit of a SpinWatch notice. Let's read. SpinWatch can reveal that the Skripal affair has resulted in the issuing of not 1, but 2 D notices to the British media, which are marked private and confidential. We can also disclose the contents of both notices, which have been obtained from a reliable source. That 2 notices were issued has been confirmed by the D Notice Committee. The committee, which is jointly staffed by government officials and mainstream media representatives, which is already suspect, has recently changed its name to the Defense and Security Media Advisory Committee. Yeah, that sounds like a nice way of saying the Gestapo. The use of the word advisory is no doubt a bid to discourage the public from thinking that this is a censorship committee. However, the DSMA notices, as they are now officially called, are one of the miracles of British state censorship. They are a mechanism whereby the British state simply advises the mainstream media what not to publish in notices with no legal force. It's just basically a bullying letter from the Homeowners Association, right? The media then voluntarily comply. Sergei Skripal and his daughter Yulia were poisoned in Salisbury and discovered collapsed on a park bench in the late afternoon of Sunday, 4th of March. Less than 3 days later, on 7th of March, the first and until now undisclosed notice was issued. The notice stated that the issue surrounding the identity of a former MI6 informer, Sergei Skripal, is already widely available in the public domain. However, the identities of intelligence agency personnel associated with Sergei Skripal are not yet widely available in the public domain. And would that be Christopher Steele, which would basically shoot this whole thing down a year ago? The notice goes on to refer to Standing Notice 5 on the intelligence services. I know, right? The provisions of DSMA Notice 5 therefore apply to these identities. DSMA Notice 5 inter alia advises editors against the inadvertent disclosure of sensitive personnel information, SPI, that reveals the identity, location, or contact details of personnel and their family members who have security intelligence and or counter-terrorist backgrounds, including members of the UK security and intelligence agencies, MOD, and Special Forces.
Yeah, I like that.
Yeah, I like that too. And if you're not seeing it, we got ourselves a D notice. Notice 5. That makes D5.
Got a flashback of signs, yeah, take you back, yeah.
Taking you back to the olden days of yesteryear. No, just last year, July 2018, it was a couple months after those articles I just read you, post 1743. No, this was responding to an Anon. Q, will this still be the month the world discovered the truth and what we Anons know is conspiracy no more? And Q answered, was the truth revealed regarding FISA dossier? Important marker. Think connections, D5Q. Well, look, we've talked about D5 connections really until I'm about blue in the face. I'm about sick of doing it, to be honest with you. We've talked about missiles. We've talked about avalanches. We have talked about DNA proteins. We have talked about all kinds of ideas, and they all make sense. Donald Trump's named themselves a chess move. I mean, you name it, we've talked about them, and they all make a lot of sense, right? And I have a feeling it's probably one of these things that Q is referring to that has a lot of different, ways that we can interpret it. But I thought this one was very interesting because it seems to me like this DSMA and their little D5 notices basically put this kind of gag order on the media in telling one of the most essential parts to this story, which was simply that if this guy Skripal is indeed the source of the Steele dossier, he says it's bunk, it cancels the whole thing, and here it was sitting on these D5 notices, which is really just there for public consumption. Now, I could be wrong. Maybe that's not what Q's talking about at all, but I did find it very interesting, and it seems like our connection would have been Skripal and Steele, right, which we already kind of knew. But if the media was flat out saying this, acknowledging it, it probably was also acknowledging that this whole thing was bunk. Remember, Christopher Steele does not want to cop to this story. He doesn't want to support the dossier's information. That's because everybody who knows what's inside knows that it's trash, including James Nobody's homie Comey and are about to be indicted Andrew McCabe. Hannity's going to be bummed. He did the same show for like 2 years. He's going to be so bummed. Joe Biden tells bizarre story about how he once faced down a gang leader named Corn Pop. Don't step the Corn Pop! All right, look, this story is hilarious, so we're just going to montage. Check it out.
Oh, it's a montage, because we ain't trying to watch the whole dang thing now.
This is the diving board area, and I was one of the guards. And they weren't allowed to. It was a 3-meter board. If you fell off sideways, you landed on the darn cement over there. And Corn Pop was a bad dude. And he ran a bunch of bad boys. And I did. And back in those days, to show how things have changed, one of the things you had to use, if you used pomade in your hair, you had to wear a bathing cap. And so he was up on the board, wouldn't listen to me. I said, "Hey, Esther, you. Off the board, or I'll come up and drag you off." Well, he came off, and he said, "I'll meet you outside." He was waiting for 3 guys in straight razors. Not a joke. There's a guy named Bill Wright, Mouse, the only white guy, and he did all the pools. He was the mechanic. And I said, "What am I going to do?" He said, "Come down here in the basement where mechanics, where all the pool filter is." So I walked out with the chain, and I walked up to my car. And those days, you used to remember the straight razor. You'd bang them on the curb, get them rusty, put them in the rain barrel, get them rusty. And I looked at him, but I was smart then. I said, first of all, I said, when I tell you get off the board, you get off the board, I'll kick you out again, but I shouldn't have called you Esther Williams. I apologize for that. I apologize, but I didn't know that apology was going to work. He said, "You apologize to me?" I said, "I apologize for that, not for throwing you out, but I apologize for what I said." He said, "Okay," closed the straight razor, and my heart began to beat again.
All right, well, look, that story was awesome. Don't act like it wasn't. That story was awesome. I have no idea if he really roughed up a gangster named Corn Pop out by the pool in his glory days, but it's a pretty sweet story, bro. I love the way you told it. But I noticed that he was talking about corn pops. Corn has been on the brain lately. Lots of people talking about corn. Now, I'm not going to take you through the whole progression of this, very much like the dog tweets. It seems like these corn topics keep coming up. And we saw this way back when James Nobody's homie Comey posted this picture in one of his older statuses. He was standing out there in his field to let everybody know that James Comey is outstanding in his field. Now, this Twitter status is a different one. It's not the same one as that original one, but it was being referenced by Q. Millions of 2016 Trump voters are not racist. Now those Americans need the strength of character to resolve they will not again vote for someone who clearly is. It's not about judges or taxes. It's about who we are as a nation. And who we are as a nation has a lot to do with our judges and taxes. But that's just me. Back to the Q post. And this one was 3525 from the 28th of July. How about that? It's almost like it was a year later of the article that I just read you again. But that probably has nothing to do with the fact that I'm Mystic Mac. It was posted at 7:54:54. How about that? That's 45 backwards twice. If you like math. Was the corn right for harvesting? It is now. And then we had this weird where it looks like something's missing out of this stringer, but we have a 93 and a DK within these brackets. And I'm not really sure what this is. I'm not really ready to wager a guess, but I just want to reference the corn reference. And this came from the same day, a few posts before, 3521. And this was in reference to Devin Nunes' status. Farms produce Well, farms produce all kinds of things, and I guess a farm can produce corn, and it can also produce crops. 5-5, generally meaning loud and clear. I read you loud and clear. And this was in reference to Devin Nunes' status when he says corn ready for to be cut. And this was again on July 28th. How about that? Corn ready for to be cut. Well, my English isn't fantastic, but I know that that's not correct. It's either corn ready to be cut or corn ready for cutting. So 4-2, is that a reference to 4-2? Who would be 4-2? We've had a bunch of references to the old President 4-2 back in the day, and I'm sure you guys all know exactly who that is. Haven't really heard much from him lately. But this was Devin Nunes' corn reference, and we saw another one from Chuck Grassley. And that's over here just from the other day, September 14th. See the little dents in the middle of the kernel? Corn watch! When all the kernels are dented, it's just a matter of time until the moisture dries out of the ear of corn. We like to start harvest when moisture level is. And this refers you to an Instagram post, and it's a very similar looking piece of corn with little dents in there. They got little... See it. Who knows? Maybe it's binary code. It's a bunch of zeros. Either way, everyone's talking about corn. Okay, so I want to cap off this story by letting you know it looks like our boy Corn Pop was a real dude. Not just a real bad dude, but a real dude. Yeah, William L. Morris died at the age of 73 in 2016. Looks like he was a gang leader of a group called the Romans. How about that? Well, there you go, Joe Biden. Here's your street cred back. You earned it.
Do not put it on me, sir.
Gonna do it anyway. So, is Joe Biden just popping off about a story about corn pops? Is this a call out to maybe some CIA farm-grown knuckleheads for some sleeper cells to come on out and start some trouble, just as we're about to see an indictment? Could very well be, not sure. But it looks like Grassley's in on it, Nunes is in on it, and now Biden, as well as Corn Pop, is in on the game. All right, so Horowitz is finalizing his probe. A draft has been sent to the FBI and DOJ. Of course, Christopher Wray is going to decide what needs to be redactipated. We'll see if he shows his true colors here or not. But it looks like we're finally starting to see something come to light. And it looks like a lot of the media talking heads are saying that they think Andrew McCabe is indeed going to be indicted. I find this all very interesting. We have another pushback to the Flynn sentencing, of course, because I think we all want to see how this shakes out first, right? But it's going to be very, very interesting. And now it looks like Andrew McCabe has already worn out his welcome over there at CNN, quote unquote, news. Check it out.
Andrew McCabe, he's already in hot water, as we discussed last night. He is now currently facing a potential indictment for leaking sensitive material and then lying about it. But his anxious legal team is making yet another last-ditch attempt to shield their client from federal charges by pushing a rumor that a grand jury initially failed to indict their client. At the very latest, Fox News contributor Sarah Carter and the president of Judicial Watch, Tom Fitton. Sarah, is there any truth to that rumor? Because I haven't heard that, and I think I'm pretty close to the story.
That's right. I haven't heard that either. And I know no one is talking at the Department of Justice about it, Sean. Not at all. They are not talking about whether there was a grand jury, whether there has been any decision by that grand jury. I have talked to a number of sources, and they are very tight-lipped on this. What I am hearing is that Michael Bromwich, the attorney for McCabe, maybe leaking this information himself in an effort to try to get the media to push a different narrative on McCabe. Now, I don't know if that is true either. All I am hearing is from sources that this is a possibility. So that's really interesting here. McCabe made a final-ditch effort. Jesse Liu, the U.S. attorney, wasn't buying it. The deputy assistant attorney general was not buying it. They rejected his appeal. So that's where it's at right now.
Are they going to be willing to apply the laws to their own? That's the question tonight.
Well, we're not even sure that McCabe is actually going to be indicted. I hope he is. Now, he'll be indicted not on Spygate, but on lying about, frankly, the Clinton, his leaks about the Clinton Foundation non-investigation, the intelligence community, and they all agree they were going to go in there and confront him with it, with the idea of getting the response as a witness and a target. So they were trying to destroy Trump from the beginning, and that's outlined in the IG report, and the Justice Department couldn't manage to figure out whether that was a criminal violation of the president's rights and a fraud on the United States. It doesn't suggest to me that a FISA investigation or frauds on the FISA court are going to be prosecuted either, but we'll see. You know, my concern is that the deep state will narrowly define the crimes and decide not to proceed. I just hope Attorney General Barr takes his own counsel as opposed to listening to the thousands of James Comey's that are in the Justice Department and FBI still.
We got a lot of ground to cover beyond this, too.
Okay, so it doesn't look good for McCabe at all. And of course, like I've been saying all along, once we highlight this story, we're going to have to contrast it with James Comey's story. And then, of course, you have to look at Aunt Loretta Lynch's story. And of course, Rod Rowe's story. Remember, he was the one encouraged to wear a wire and spy on the POTUS. And it seems like that might have gone even deeper than we suspect. And who knows what else was being discussed. But I do want to point out that if you will remember, Michael Bromwich is the guy, one of the guys representing McCabe. And of course, if you don't remember Michael Bromwich, this next picture will jog your memory. That's right. Dun, dun, dun. That's what it looks like to actually happen in the picture, right? Lest we forget his last gig. Yeah, represented Dr. Christine Blasey Ford. And remember, we believe survivors, right? Except for this one. Yeah, this was a funky story. And now it's coming out that this was really all about putting that little asterisk next to Kavanaugh's name. Interestingly enough, this whole thing is coming back into play, right? They're going after Kavanaugh's name again. How about that? Looks like Bromwich is doing double duty, and he's coming back into the movie to make some more trouble, right? Well, this is likely to fall apart, of course, because there's not really much to stand on. But I do think there's a few different points that this is making me think about. First of all, Kavanaugh, like I just said, putting the asterisk next to Kavanaugh's name is really, really important because they know at some point, who knows, this could lead to, I don't know if this will turn into the a Roe versus Wade situation further down the line. I don't think that's something that we're probably going to think about right away, but I suppose it could be a possibility. But let's keep in mind, too, that RBG, Darth Bader, her health has not been going so well. She's got cank in the pank. She's got the terminal cancer. You don't recover from that, even though they say she's recovered. Who knows what's going on with Ruth Bader, right? But we know that she's likely out the dough. And that probably means that we're going to have to start talking about the Supreme Court again. Now, keep in mind, too, that Kavanaugh is really antitrust, and that's going to break up a lot of things too. And I think that's a bigger story than we might be talking about, considering all these deep state knuckleheads funnel a lot of their money through these trusts. And of course, they're much harder to break up legally, and that's why Kavanaugh would be so important to them. So there's a few different reasons on the face of this all why they're going to go back for the Kavanaugh thing. And of course, then flat out really just to stall and distract is always just a another result that they would like to get out of this. But I wanted to point that out. And of course, let's not forget this notorious pic right here. Let me blow it up for you. Yeah, look at that right there. That's Sheila, Miss Jackson, if you're nasty. And what are you handing Mr. Bromwich there? Is that a birthday card? Maybe it's an invitation to the family barbecue. I don't know, but it looks pretty suspect to me. It looks like Bromwich is on the take. Finally, I'm over here on the Hill, and they're showing a tweet from President Trump. Saudi Arabia oil supply was attacked. There's reason to believe that we know the culprit, are locked and loaded depending on verification, but are waiting to hear from the kingdom as to who they believe was the cause of this attack and under what terms we would proceed. Houthi rebels in Yemen have claimed to be behind the 2 drone strikes against 2 oil refineries in Saudi Arabia. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo accused Iran of being behind the attacks. Tehran has denied the allegations. Iranian Foreign Minister Javad Zarif tweeted Sunday that Pompeo's accusation is turning to max deceit, a reference to the Trump administration's maximum pressure strategy. And it seems to be that this looks, at least to me, like they're just trying to goad us into some sort of attack, and of course putting pressure on Saudi Arabia. But you know, I don't know. I'll be honest with you, I would really like to wait another 48 hours before truly commenting on this. I have a feeling that this is a big distraction. Now, whether or not we really know the culprit, not sure. If it's Iran, not sure. Whether it really was Houthi rebels in Yemen, which is truly a terrible situation out there, you know, we don't really know. But I find the timing to be incredibly wonderful, just as we're about to bring this IG report to light and maybe finally see some indictments. But so this shouldn't really be unexpected. And like I said, maybe another 48 hours, and I think more things are going to shake out in regards to this. But it wouldn't be surprising to see Iran turn up the heat, particularly in this time. This is, remember, Iran is essentially the quintessential black site out there for much of these deep state knuckleheads where they can operate freely. And of course, Iran is something they're going to want to protect. So, like I said, remains to be seen. I'm going to wait 48 before we talk about it some more, but there you go. All right, Patriots, that's all I got for you for now. As always, if you like this video, please click like, share, and subscribe. Thanks to all of you who do that already. I greatly appreciate it. If you're new to my channel, welcome to you. Please understand that from time to time, you're going to get unclicked, unnotified, unsubscribed, and my videos, I know, are getting harder and harder to find. So I highly suggest bookmarking my page. It'll help you find me a little bit easier. My alternate links are down below. And I believe everything is up. My Gab, my BitChute. I believe Brighteon is working now too. We'll see. But everything else should be working. DropSpace. And of course, I'm at Twitter at IPOT1776. That's IPOT1776. I've got a new Gab going. That's also IPOT1776. Please join me over there. All those links are down below in the video description. And if you'd like to send me some information, you can email me. My email is down below. My P.O. box is down below if you're old school and want to send something. And if you'd like to support the channel, my Patreon is linked down below. All those are down below in the video description. All right, kids, this is Sir Patrick Mack. And until next time, stay away from corn pop.